And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Aage Nost, author, on-air personality, seasoned aircraft pilot, hypnotherapist, UFO researcher, and cosmic explorer. He is a student of many sciences, including metaphysics, theoretical physics, and different forms and theories of spirituality. Augie hosts a weekly universal consciousness show and returns today to talk about the German flying discs. Augie, thanks for coming and welcome back.
Well, thank you. I have coffee in hand again and I'm ready to go. So, let's have some fun.
Yes. So, I had a guest that is one of these people that some people call 20 and back, where they were abducted and spent 20 years in the secret space program and came back. And I believe he said that the Germans in World War II had UFOs and made contact with the ETs. What do you know?
Well, I think they're absolutely right because Germany, or the war machine, or the previous war machine, I should say, they had their own Roswell in 1936.
I didn't know that.
There was a fairly large disk that crashed in Bavaria, in southeastern Germany. And in 1936, the technologies were somewhat limited, and they didn't know what to do with it. They just tried to get into it, I guess. They, according to Wendell Stevens, which I have a lot of my information from, he said they tried to get into it for some lengthy period of time. They couldn't get into it. And they finally did get in, and there's some controversy of what they found inside of it. But over the next decade or so, they were able to back engineer some of that, because they found the drive system, which actually was somewhat similar to some of the German flying discs, the drive system in there, because it had the Mercury engine in it. And we know this because there's German papers, mostly written in German before they were translated, and the translations is I'm a little careful with that, because a lot of times things get skewed. If it's translated 2 or 3 times, then sometimes you lose some of the facts in it. But we know that they did have the flying discs. We have the pictures, we have the testimonies. In fact, when I grew up back in Norway, this is just a novelty I'm going to mention, because on the farm back there, we had one farm worker that was a prisoner of war in Germany. And he said that he saw round aircraft flying in the skies over Germany. I remember him telling us that when I was back on the farm. And that is one of the things that really got me interested in UFOs and flying discs, because he explained that these had no propellers, no wings, no nothing, just a round disc. And that didn't make sense. So that's one of the things that I discovered there. And another thing is that we believe from the papers and from my discussions with Wendell Stevens, Colonel Wendell Stevens, that is, which is probably the one person that knows more about the flying discs than anybody in the world. He researched it more. He went to Germany. He went to Switzerland talking about it, researching it. He went to South America looking for them. And he found some really incredible information, as well as pictures. And I was able to, he lived in Tucson, so we became friends. And I interviewed him on one of my TV shows that I had in Tucson. In fact, you can see that TV interview on broadcastteamalpha.com, where Nori and I have a lot of videos all the way down to the bottom of the stream of videos. You will find an interview with myself and Colonel Wendell Stevens, where he shows firsthand pictures of what he found from all the way from the Vril, which is the early flying discs, all the way up to the Haunebu 4. That is the one that it was very big. In fact, I have some notes from that. If you want to know some of the stats on it, how fast it was and how it was built and stuff, I can read some of these notes off to you.
Well, you mentioned Mercury. So are you saying that Mercury is the fuel source?
Well, partially, because the Mercury engine, or the Thule engine, it was composed of 2 cylinders rotating in opposite direction. There were magnets inside of the outer cylinder and magnets outside of the inner cylinder, and they were rotating opposite of each other. Between the 2 of them, there were liquid red mercury. And when you rotate magnets, you create a plasma field. If you're rotating it close to another one, there you can see a little light coming out of it. And this somehow, in reaction with the red mercury, created an effect there. I don't know how to translate that. It's more like an gravity nullification effect, which can be directed. And that's how they create the propulsion system. And also in the later Haunebu circular flying discs, they also didn't have the disc rotating in it. They used it. There was electromagnetic steering. So this rotating, these 2 rotating discs, they created the nullification effect. And inside that plasma bubble around the disc, everything inside of it was weightless. And that is why that we have pictures showing the flying discs sitting on the ground and upside down, screwed onto the bottom of it, was the turret of a Panzer tank, or a tank with a cannon and everything on it, because it was just screwed on underneath because it has no weight. Now that thing is thousands of pounds of weight, but inside the bubble it didn't have any weight. They just screwed it on and they used it as a weapon.
Was it used in World War II?
I don't know about the turret was used, but I know that Wendell Stevens told me that on one of the bombing raids that came out of England flying in over Germany, there were 800 bombers they sent out in one night. And, being at night, they picked the night when it was, overcast, so high overcast. So it was hard to see anything. All the aircraft turned the lights off and unsynchronized the engines so that you could not pinpoint where they were. And they were flying in over Germany and bombed targets on the ground. In one night, they lost over 1/3 of the bombers. And the way that happened, according to Wendell Stevens, is that they had the Haunebus flying behind the fleet of aircraft. And they aimed a weapon at the aircraft. And that was they called it a Pristron tube. Or also another name for it was Die Motorstapel. With other words, the motor stopper. And there was kind of like a, actually I think it was a directional EM pulse. So when they aimed that at the aircraft, the EM pulse shut off the electric system, there went the engines, and down went the aircraft. and they lost over a third of them in one night. And that's when the Allied forces realizes we're up against something here. We don't know what it is. We cannot control it. The only way we can win is by a ground invasion. And that's when they planned the Normandy invasion of Germany. Because one of the generals, he was on record saying about a few months before the end of the war, and he says, we can still lose this war. Because they knew the Germans had something, they didn't know what it was. And it was deadly to the Allied forces.
Now, they back engineered the craft, but do you think that they have ever made contact with the ETs? And if so, if they made some kind of deal?
I don't know what kind of deal they made, but back in about the early 1920s, there was a lady. She was part of the Thule Society, and her name was Maria Ortiz. They call it Maria Orsic over here, but it was Ortiz. And she was a channel. And she said she channeled from somebody in the Aldebaran star system. And she was writing down what she channeled, and a lot of times she didn't have no clue of what she wrote down. Equations, drawings, and stuff that came to her, and she wrote it down. And most people, in the beginning, they laughed at her, says, yeah, sure. And she was able to get some of those drawings in front of a military official that had a little clue on science. And he was looking at her drawings and he said, wait a minute, there is something here. So he took it to somebody, and they realized that this uneducated 20-year-old girl had come up with something that is so brilliant that their scientists haven't thought of it yet. So they invited her in and they put her to work, create more. And they said that there was an invitation from somebody in the Aldebaran system. They sent the messages through her for her to show our society how to build a craft so we could go there and visit. Basically, that's what she said. Of course, the Germans had a different idea about the visitation. They wanted to use it for other things. But this was perfected in coordination, I think, with what they found in Bavaria, as well as what they found when they went to India and Tibet and were looking for old writings of technology and the occult. They found drawings of the Vimana, which, there was the Rama Empire's flying ships.
Mm-hmm.
And the drawings from those look totally different. They look like pyramids, and they look in different ways. They don't look like flying discs, all of them. But the Vimana also had a Mercury engine. That is one of the commonalities between 9,000 years ago, actually probably 11,000 now, because some of the early writings that I found dates back 9 to 12,000 years, where they talk about the Vimanas as well as what they are built. And they also talk about the fact that people that flew those things a lot, they got sick from flying it. Same thing with the German flying discs. The people that worked in the factories, they often got sick, especially the ones that worked on the Houndebou 3 and the Houndebou 4, because they did one big difference. They didn't use they did in the Houndebou 3, they used the mercury a lot, but they also, in the later stages of the building, they used D2O, deuterium, which is heavy water or radioactive water. And they put that in there instead of the mercury, which gave them a lot more power. They were able to, they talk about the Houndebou 3 here. 40,000 kilometers an hour. How do they explain that?
Right.
Now, it did say actually 7,000 to 40,000. That's on the Honeyboo 3. And it was a big craft, 71 meters or 232 feet across, circular. They call it a tachyonator. That's what they call it. Tachyonator 7C was the drive system in the later ones. And that went from as a column right through the middle of the craft, from the very top to the very bottom. And in my notes here from Colonel Stevens here, I read that it had a steering system as a magnetic field directional impulse, is what he called it. And it had no gyroscope in it, which the early ones did to keep it level. And also the speed was 7,000 to 40,000 kilometers an hour. And that's about 25,000 miles an hour, just about that. And then the hull of the Honeyboo, of all of the Honeyboos actually, was double hull. And they had a cooling substance inside of which I don't know what was, because Wendell Stevens never mentioned anything about that. It could be, I don't know, it could be several things. The Honeyboo 3 had a crew of 32 people, and it was used in the last 2 years of the war to evacuate things and people out of Germany, going to base 211 on the Antarctica. And that's where they built the new base, Neue Berlin, or New Berlin. And there is a record of 19 test flights and no crashes on the Honeyboo 3. The Honeyboo 1, that was in the beginning stages of the Honeyboo. It was very unstable. They kept crashing on them. So after a little while, they couldn't find pilots to fly it. So they scrapped the 1 and they rebuilt it to create the Honeyboo 2, which had a lot more, stability. That was 26 meters across, and that's 76 feet. And that could do about 6,000 kilometers to 21,000 kilometers, about 13,000 miles an hour.
Do you think that those discs are just like scout ships from a mothership, or do you think those discs could also do long distance space flight?
It's obviously you've done some research because scout ships, it could very well be, because the end of the war, the Allied, when they came in, ran over some of these production facilities of aircraft and other things. They found drawings of a ship it was called the Andromeda, which is the Andromeda craft. And in there, they had the Andromeda, Colonel Stevens talked about that too. That was a circular, cigar-shaped craft. And it was 455 feet long. Now that's quite considerable. That's aircraft carrier capacity. And it had four, the propulsion system had 4 of those Thule engines, or the Glocke, which it started out as. And they talk about the crew of 130 people. They had 4 of these flying discs inside of this cigar. So they could be carried with the cigar anywhere, and then the ships could leave the cigar and go do things and come back to the cigar. And 130 people was the normal crew on it. And they also had 2 of the modified Vril, the early flying discs that they had in there. So this was huge, really huge craft.
Now, this is something they built. This is not a ship that went down.
They found the drawings of it, and they found no evidence that they have it actually built while they were in Germany. Though there is papers showing that they may have built it in Antarctica at base 211, or possibly in South America, but I kind of doubt it because it's too big. It needed too much of a building facility. It would be kind of conspicuous. I think they wanted to build that inside the cave that they found in Neue Schwabenland.
I'm sure you're aware of Bob Lazar and his claims about working at Area 51, and I believe he talks about that the engines on those craft are powered by element 151. Do you think that he's correct about that, or mistaken, or giving out misinformation and it's really mercury?
There was a time when I didn't really believe everything he said, but the thing about it is that he's been constant for 25 years in everything he talks about. The lie detectors, everything works out fine. So I am starting to think that, yes, I think he was telling the truth. Another thing that make me believe him is that the chairs inside that, he called it the sports model, the chairs were too small for people. It had to be a smaller humanoid sitting in there, which could be explained if he talks about the small grays. Then that's probably because they also talk about having those, EB1, EB2, they have those aliens in captivity. So I kind of believe what he's saying. I believe that either way, he's telling the truth. That is my total conviction. Mm-hmm. He believes it.
Then I guess those ships just have a different propulsion system, although it seems similar.
Yeah. I think that, when they come here, they may have different origins. Space is full of life. Speed of light is not a speed limitation. You can go beyond that. All you have to do is just step out of the physical, move in a higher vibration, and then step back into the physical, and you can travel millions of light years in a very short time.
The guest that I mentioned earlier said that there is a wormhole near Jupiter, and that's how he believes they, travel those long distances.
Yeah. The wormholes, it appears, even theoretical physicists talk about this, that they're kind of like, they call it wormhole because it goes in one here, and then there's this worm going someplace in the universe, and you're exiting at the other end. And there is, from what I found, is that you can direct those wormholes where you want them to go. And that is done by consciousness. Because we do live in a mind-created universe, according to both theoretical physicists, quantum science, and what I've seen, it's that there's computer language in everything we see around us. And it wasn't put there by us, but it just shows up as an effect of the creation.
So you think everything in creation boils down to ones and zeros?
Well, that's a tough one to say yes to, but I have to.
You mentioned earlier that the Germans were looking into the occult and other cultures for spacecraft. Was that the only thing they were looking into, a spacecraft, or were there other things?
Oh, no. They were looking into all areas of the occult very deeply, because Hitler was a fanatic about it. And many of his generals and high-ranking officers, they got involved with it, and they buried themselves into that research. And with good reason, because in there, thousands of years ago, we knew stuff that we don't know how to do today. So I think there was a good reason for them doing it, especially when they went to Tibet and found the drawings of the Vimana. They made good use of that. I am sure of it. And then when they moved everything down to Neue Berlin or Base 211 in Antarctica, then, well, there's even... Here's a statement I wrote down. I wanted to make sure I read it off right to you. There was a German Navy Grand Admiral, Karl Dönitz. He was the head of the flying disc program. He stated, "The German submarine fleet is proud to having built for dear Führer in another part of the world a Shangri-La, an impregnable fortress." That was the cave in Antarctica.
Do you think ETs are walking among us today on the planet?
I am quite sure of it. I am absolutely sure of it.
Do they naturally look like us, or are they shape-shifting to look like us?
Probably both. I know some of them look just like us, like the Pleiadians do. They come here, visit, and they're dressed like us, walking down the street, and we'll never know it. So, and I think that the sooner we actually realize that we're not alone, even in the streets, they may be just walking down by us, but they're also telepathic. I have a friend in Texas. He is a physicist. And he said that when you walk down the street, if you're kind of like in a high spot, so you can see people down below you in the street, send the message out, "I can see you. Turn around. I can see you." Find out which one of them on the street turns around and looks at you. He has said, "I have been able to do that twice," he said. Somebody turned around and looked at me. If they're telepathic, it could be, you know.
I'd like to try that sometime.
Yeah, I know. I've been trying. I haven't had any luck yet, but it'd be fun.
Have you seen a UFO yourself?
Oh yes, many times.
What?
You know, when you fly as much as I did, especially at night and on the high altitudes, you see stuff that shouldn't be there. I even back in Norway when I was probably about 11, 12 years old, I built a UFO detector that worked fine. And it built around a compass, on the fact that when something that creates an anti-gravity effect, and it moves through the gravity field, it creates ripples in the gravity field, which would affect a compass needle. So I built everything around a compass. So two wires on the compass needle is here, 2 wires going on each side. And I rigged that through a bell and a battery and a breaker switch. So I turn the breaker switch on, and now the circuit is just waiting to get connected. So if the compass needle touches one of the wires, the bell goes off, and it works. I saw it go off 3 times. And I remember twice, 2 of those times I went outside with binoculars and I saw something. And there were several times my mom told me that that thing up in your bedroom, it went off again. What is it? You know, but that thing is, there's a drawing of it on how you can build your own on Broadcast Team Alpha. If you go in under the picture gallery, you can find it. Way down there, there's 5,200 pictures. So you may have to look for a bit. Strange pictures that shouldn't exist, but they do. So go visit. But one particular incident, that was in northern Nebraska. I was on a training flight. I was giving instrument training to a student. And she had a hood on, and so she couldn't see anything but the panel. And I was sitting there on the side. I could see everything. And I saw this thing coming at a 45-degree angle on the right side, coming in underneath the craft. It flew right underneath me, about 400 feet or so. But it looked strange. It wasn't an aircraft. It looked, I don't know if anybody else has seen anything like this, but it looked kind of like a skateboard, but it had windows on the side of it. So this really puzzled me, and I haven't talked much about this because nobody else has seen anything like this, and it sounds goofy. But that's what it was. Another time I was I think I was flying through Kansas, going down to the burn center in Houston with somebody from up north in a medical emergency flight in the King Air. And we were going in and out of the clouds, and I could see this little pencil coming from the left side of my field of vision, passing right off to the right. Probably took about 3 seconds to go from the time I saw it on the left side until it was gone on the right. But it looked like a short pencil, and had no wings, no nothing, no tail on it, but just phew, right across, maybe around a couple of 3 miles ahead of the aircraft. And obviously a small cigar. Things happen out there when you fly. You see stuff.
Is it that you just don't talk about it so you'll keep your job?
It used to be that way. Now pilots are coming out talking about it. And I would say that decades ago, pilots did get fired for talking about stuff like this because they had this stigma that if you see aliens, or if you see flying saucers, you're nuts. So get out of here. And the airlines were intimidated into working that way.
What are your thoughts on the Galactic Federation?
Well, there's a lot of disinformation in there. And when it talks about, there's one thing that I think I'm probably going to say it for the very first time here on your show, and that is that we come to Saint Germain. He's part of the Galactic Federation. Where does the word saint come from? Think about that. It's a religious term. Why would a spiritual being way beyond our thinking and our technology be using our spiritual term in his title? I'm not saying that an entity like him may not exist. I think it is. But the term saint, that is a Catholic term. Why would he accept or import that term? I don't know. I'm probably going to get some flack on this one, but that's okay.
So you're saying that Saint Germain is an ET?
Well, ET goes back to extraterrestrial. So obviously he is not terrestrial. So he must be, but at a higher vibration. He is a spiritual being that has the capability by technology, mind technology, to come here, maybe take on a physical body for the purpose of easier communication and whatever he needs to do, and then go back to his natural spiritual state.
It's interesting that you brought up Saint Germain because just very recently I had a guest that was talking about him. And I think there are books as well.
You wonder sometimes. You really have to wonder sometimes. And there's, let's say there's 10 channelers out there that channeling Saint Germain. And with small variances, they all talk about the same thing. I'm wondering if they watch each other's show and then just recite what they heard. But I think there's some core evidence. There's some core conscious technology behind what he talks about. I think the entity is real. But the description that he come through down here, a lot of the channelers, I'm questioning, but there are some good ones. And there are some others that is good, but they don't want to publicly let people know that they are a channel. In fact, I know because I'm working with one. There is this stigma out there, and a lot of people, and I've had that too, that if you start talking too far outside of the box, you lose some of your credibility. You lose your credibility with the people that are still in the box, that's for sure. But some of the people also that have their toe out of the box, they can believe you so far, but beyond that, you lose them. And I know I've been in that camp for a while, and right now I'm so controversial, I don't really give much anymore. So I'm starting to talk more about things that I have seen and what I know.
During our last podcast together, you mentioned time travel. What can you tell us about that?
Most people, they believe that if the government tell you something, that's the truth. So when the government says there is no such thing as time travel, there ain't no time travel. Well, then again, I have read science journals that says, yes, we know how to make a time machine. We know how to do it, but we just don't have the fuel to fuel it yet. They are missing a point. They should consider the most powerful instrument in our world as a fuel source, the mind. Because quantum mechanics tells us that we are living in a mind-created universe. What does a mind create? Thought, mental images, and it creates energy. So if we put the mind to work going into the future or going into the past, we should be able to do that. And these science journals, they get very specific about it. In fact, I have a note that I figured you might go here, and there's something that you can do. There's a place in China that has become a tourist attraction. There's a tunnel, about a 2-mile long tunnel. It's quite a long tunnel. When people go in and they come out of the tunnel, they lose. Yeah, they gain about an hour of time. And they just can't explain it. Because clocks going in could be right now for 3:30 here. If I went through the tunnel, it would be 4:30 when I came out. Now, the government says, don't worry about it. It's because of the cell towers on each end. They send an erroneous signal. But there is a problem. People with mechanical clocks also gain that hour. There was an article. Let's see. There was an article written on it where there was a newspaper man that drove 8 times back and forth there in one day. And the 8th time he came through, the sun had gone down and it was late in the evening. When he came back through, the sun was back up again. And he wrote the article. It was written in a Chinese newspaper and then picked up by other newspapers from other countries. So it exists out there. And this is something that it is from what I wrote in my note here on. It's I don't speak Chinese, so I'm Guizhou province in China, and there are thousands of people that is experiencing this time dilation, and it's a real thing. Another short example I'm going to tell you about. This is actually very verified. In 2003, there was a stock trader in New York that got arrested for insiders trading. His name was Andrew Carl Seen. And he started trading stocks with $800. In a few weeks, he made $350 million. He did 126 high-risk trades and never lost one. The regulators, they found out about this and they said, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So they came and arrested him for insiders trading. He was hauled into court, and Andrew, he told the judge, yeah, he says, I'm really sorry about this because I'm a time traveler from the year 2256. And I read the records of how things worked back here, and I thought it would be a fun thing to participate in. So I went back and I got carried away, he says. I went too far with it. And the judge, of course, didn't believe him, so he put him in jail. And a couple of days later, they said a $1 million bail for him. A couple of days later, somebody came with a $1 million, bailed him out, and they left, and neither one of them ever showed up ever since. This was written up in the newspapers, and also the court records can be read on it. So this was actually verified to the highest level, well, not for the newspaper, but the court records. So things like this happen. I have had some very strange experiences with one electronics device that I have. And it's the same device that Art Bell, you know who he was.
Right.
He got a hold of this same device that I have. He never dared to turn it on. He said, but I've used it quite a bit in the past. And BBC television found out about this device that I had, and also a TV interview that I did in 2003, where I interviewed the man that made it. And you can go to Broadcast Team Alpha, way down at the bottom again. You can see that TV interview where you show the machine and the whole thing, it's there. And BBC television came over to the United States to do a TV documentary on time travel. They were going to do that with Michio Kaku and Green and another theoretical physicist that was unknown to me at the time, and myself. So they flew me down to New Orleans and we did the shoot. And this TV documentary, gosh, it was shown to 1 billion people around the world in all English-speaking countries. And I have learned a lot about time since then, because some of the things that I talked about or that I've seen actually didn't happen. And I learn now that there are different timelines going into the future. At the time I did that TV documentary with BBC television, my mind was totally embedded in the corruption of government. And on my TV shows, I was exposing that corruption every week. And that's where my mind was. So what I saw was probably what would have happened if I had continued that timeline. But in 2000, slightly after that, I changed. I created a more spiritual timeline for myself. I left all the government corruption behind. I figured they're so corrupt, they can destroy themselves. They don't need my help. And so now I went on in a spiritual direction, and I created a new timeline for myself with good and better things in it. And that is my explanation that I can think of why those things, but the collapse of government, all the collapse of the stock market and everything that I saw, it didn't happen, luckily.
Now, what is the machine that you have and what does it do?
Okay, the machine is fairly simple. It has a black box with he called it a time chip. With the inventor, he never wanted to talk much about the time chip or what's in it. He said it dilates time, but he didn't want to talk much about it. I guess that's his trade secret. It has a time coil, which I wrap around my head. And it has an electromagnet that is about that long, which you place to your solar plexus. And this goes, both of them is wired into the black box. What it does, that magnet is so strong. You can put, you can have it here, let's say on the table right here. You put something on the other end of the table and boing, it will go right to the magnet. Very strong. And what I did, I put it on, it goes through the time chip, it sets up a plasma bubble around you. You can't see the bubble, but it's there. Imagine if you had a Carillion photo machine, or if you had infrared, you probably will be able to see some of it. And inside that bubble, you could travel where your mind would lead you. One example was when I was doing it, I was walking down the street and I saw myself walking down the street because I kind of was looking for evidence, something that I could attach myself to. And I saw a newspaper stand, you know, those automatic ones, you put a quarter in it, you pull the newspaper out. And I could read the newspaper, but it was 6 months in advance. So another thing is what I did, I was sitting and I got pictures of, this is actual evidence of time travel and time slippage. If you go to Broadcast Team Alpha, I think it's page 15 or 17 on the picture gallery, there's two pictures next to each other. I was sitting in front of the computer one day and I was watching a video from a newspaper over in Europe, my hometown actually. And I took a screenshot of it. Quite a while later, I sat down at the same computer, went on the same video feed from that newspaper. And I went through my mind technique and I was trying to go back to the same time that I took the first picture. I tried the exact same time, is what I was aiming for. And I was sitting there and I remember everything just kind of disappearing on me, but I did take a screenshot. And I have the photo. The timestamp at the time did not quite match the exact time that the first one was taken. I missed it by 1 minute and 5 seconds. So the pictures are different. In one picture, you have leaves on the trees. The other picture have no leaves on the trees. One picture is, you can see there's been rain because the road is really wet. The other, the road is perfectly dry. And the thing about it is that in 1 minute and 5 seconds, I doubt that the roads would dry up totally or lose all the leaves in 1 minute and 5 seconds. I've been trying to get somebody to verify for me that there is no dislocations in the timestamp where that is. And I can't find anybody to do it. And I've been talking about experts that can do this kind of forensics. And when they ask me, what kind of picture is it? If I mention time travel, they don't want nothing to do with it.
If you and I were standing in a room together and you were wearing the machine and you turned it on, would you disappear in front of me?
That I don't know, because the times when I made this work, I've always been alone. And maybe that has something to do with someone else observing. I'm not sure. But I also, well, I've been by myself. I tried it back in Omaha, tried it in Phoenix, tried it in Tucson. The 3 times that in different cities, location doesn't make any difference. I don't know if even ley lines have any influence of them. It probably could, but I don't know. I think it is more of a travel of the mind.
I find
But I have, yeah,
Sorry.
let me say one more thing real quick, and that is, this is not a toy, because there are people that has been using this and they're missing. They never showed up again. In the back of one of my books, I write about how to do this actually without the machine, because once you get used to knowing and believing it is possible, you can set up your own bubble and you can actually do this by yourself.
It's interesting that Art Bell was unwilling to turn it on.
He may have, but he said on the air one time, he says, I'm sitting here looking at it and I don't dare to turn it on.
Did the inventor just send you one?
No, we bought it from him. They were pretty cheap back then. I think I paid about $400 or something like that for it.
Are you aware of any other anecdotes about time travelers?
Well, I mentioned that people are missing. There is several, actually, that Stephen Gibbs, the guy that made the machine, he told me about this, and he says, I don't talk about this much, he says, because, you know, it scares people. Well, yeah, it should. There were one young man, he was living at home, going to college. He bought one of the machines, and he brought it home, and he went upstairs in the afternoon when he got the package. And in the evening, his mom came up to get him down for dinner. She walked into the bedroom, and there, he wasn't there, but this contraption was laying in the middle of the bed. The time coil was there, the box was there, and the magnet was there. And he was gone, so she says, oh, you know, it's just, he went out. Well, that night he didn't come back, and next day they started worrying. So they filed a missing person report, and he never showed up anywhere ever since. So I guess my guess is something happened that brought him to a different time where he was not able to get back. He didn't have the machine to come back.
I wonder if he took it off or what happened, because it was still in his bedroom.
Yeah. There's several other stories that he told me about people that one guy, he had the machine in his truck. That was, he said, back in the 1980s. And he was driving the truck around, but it was a futuristic truck. And people wondered, where in the world did you get this truck? So these are stories that the inventor told me, because I got to know him fairly well. You know, we were both living in Nebraska and fairly close, and we had dinner a few times.
It's amazing.
Yeah, in fact, I'll tell you what. Here, in the back of the book, there's a whole chapter on time travel that I wrote, and it explains how we can actually do this by conditioning the mind. And there is also other people out there teaching time travel. So I don't know what they're doing necessarily, but it's a concept that has been proven for the ones that look into the evidence and not just believing the dogma of government.
I've been recently reading a report about the Monroe Institute, and within that report, they're talking about time travel. Have you read that report, or do you know anything about the Monroe Institute?
Not much. I haven't read that report. I know very little about the Monroe Institute. I know they're doing wonderful work, especially with developing and getting a good understanding of what's going on in the mind. And also near-death experiences. They research that. They're doing phenomenal work, but I haven't really studied it much.
You just showed us your book. What's the title of it, and where can people get it?
Okay. This is Spiritual Science, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access the Universal Consciousness. Or if you go to Amazon and put my name in there, it will show up. And in here is where I teach people how to use their mind in ways that you normally would think would be impossible. And I write about a lot of the things that I've been able to do because I've had some phenomenal training by some of the giants that I'm standing on their shoulders from, because one of them was Richard Welch. And I used to travel around the country teaching a mind development course where we were teaching people how to assimilate information out of a book at the rate of 50 to 100,000 words per minute with 95% retention. And it's called the ZOX Pro training course, and you can find it out there on the internet. But it's alive and well. And I used to teach this, and it was so much fun. I must have read over 1,000 books over the years just by you go through a book 2 pages a second, but you don't read it. You just let the subconscious mind take a mental picture of it, bypass the conscious mind, and put it directly into long-term memory. Later on, you do like you normally do. You ask questions to the subconscious mind, say, what was so-and-so doing on this and that incident? You ask a question that's a trigger, and the subconscious mind will bring it out. That's kind of what long-term memory is. And when you understand that, it becomes more accessible to you. If you don't believe it's possible, you're going to have a harder time. It'll still work, but it'll take you a little longer because you got to get some form of acceptance in your mind for things to work.
I guess sometimes we believe stuff, but we've got to actually experience it to move beyond belief into knowing.
Yeah, and some of the stuff we believe isn't so.
Can you give us another example of some of the unbelievable things that we can do with our mind?
Eidetic memory. That's a term that very few people know what it is. Eidetic memory is when you remember something, you don't just think of it, you see the picture of it in front of you. And I know actually 2 people. One guy, Warren Buffett, he has eidetic memory. It was really goofy. When you could ask him something, and he'd sit there and looks down, and he says, "Oh yeah, they talk about that in so-and-so book. It's at page 237 at right-hand column down at the bottom." He said they explain exactly that. He's sitting looking down into the book, but there's a problem. I can't see the book because there is no book there. He sees it because he read it. And that amazed me every time. But I had glimpses of that. And back when I was running around teaching the mind development course, the SOX Pro course, I had quite a few times glimpses of it. But that's something that has to be practiced. Otherwise, it'll go away on you. And when that happens, it's a phenomenal experience. Your life will never be the same. You'll understand that, oh man, this mind can do amazing things, just that we haven't been told that we can.
You've mentioned it a couple times, but if people want to know more about what you're up to, they go to broadcastteamalpha.com.
Yeah. broadcastteamalpha.com. That is the radio or video show that Nori Love and I are doing. every Tuesday evening, actually in about 2 hours, we're going live. And we have a weekly show there, and we put other videos on there too. And in there, broadcastteamalpha.com, you can go to picture gallery and you see 5,200 unbelievable pictures that shouldn't exist, but they do. And otherwise, we have a mastermind we have put together of incredible people. And we bend the laws of physics sometimes when we should, when we want something done. I think I mentioned that last time, talked about the mastermind a little bit, where especially when two or more minds are united in harmony, they create a third mind that has the potential mind power of the two or more of them multiplied by each other. And that is powerful. So we created rain out of basically clear skies in a matter of one hour to put out some forest fires in Northern California about 2-3 months ago. And it shouldn't have happened, but it did. So if people want to join us and check it out, send us an email to themastermindconnection@gmail.com.
Augie, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Positive message. Well, I would say we know, we don't suspect, but we know we are living in a mind-created universe. Our mind in connection with the universal mind creates everything around you. That means that if you change your mind, you are able to change your environment and everything in your existence around you. Set yourself a goal in the future that is so big that it scares the daylight out of you. And then visit that goal every day. Go back and forth, back and forth. Feel it, live it, already own it. Know it is yours, you just don't have it yet. Love it into existence. See other people enjoying it with you. When you do this, you get drawn up that timeline to it. Do whatever you can to help make it happen. You don't care where the resources come from in order to accomplish it. The universe will take care of that for you. You just look at the final product, immerse yourself in it. And there is a very good reason why you should be able to walk into it when that time-coded event happens that you place in the future.
Augie, thank you for that message, and thank you again for being my guest.
Oh, I love it. This is so much fun. I'll tell you, this you got an incredible, I remember from the last one, reading all the 655 messages afterwards. It was wonderful. You have an incredible audience, I tell you. That's, you got, if I wore a hat, I would take it off.
You're right. I have an amazing audience. And if anybody hasn't seen that prior podcast that we did together, it's number 630, and it's titled Secrets of the Universe, Christianity, and Society. All right, Augie, thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, thank you. And in the words of Spock, live long and prosper.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.